The biggest advantage of being a solo creator or a solo filmmaker is that you have the freedom to make any and every creative decision or take any creative liberty that you would like to. But on the flip side to that, the biggest downside to being a solo creator or solo filmmaker is that you are required to make every decision for the project, and you're also required to know every aspect of all the little things between the camera settings and the lighting and the lenses, and kind of can sometimes get to the point of decision fatigue. But at the end of the day, how cool is it that we can just press record and create something or help somebody out, or most of all, take what we're passionate about and share it with others who may be passionate about the same thing. And I think the ability to connect through video is just so incredibly cool. So in this video, what I would like to do is share with you, if you are just getting started in your journey, 4 of the biggest choices that you can make when creating content that's going to help elevate your content and just give you some really immersive, beautiful, and professional looking visuals. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is just your basic camera settings. Now, if you've never set a camera manually before, this topic can get super complicated extremely fast. If you ever struggle to set your camera, then just hear me out, because I'm going to simplify this as much as I possibly can, because I struggled with this for probably a good 5 years before I actually dialed it in. There are 4 settings when you're shooting video that you should know: the frame rate, the shutter speed, the ISO, and the aperture. They're all going to affect how much light comes into your camera and how your image looks. So when it comes to video, we're just going to get the easy one out of the way first, and that's the shutter speed. If you're shooting a video where you're talking to the camera, you want your frame rate to be 24 or 30 frames per second, and all you're going to do is take the shutter and just double it. So if it's at 24, you'll put it at 1/50, and if you're shooting 30 frames per second, you'll do 1/60. It's easy. Just do it, set it, get it out of the way. All right, so once the shutter's done, then I move on to the ISO. I just take this down to the lowest possible setting that it can go and just leave it there. Just leave it there for right now, because then we're going to go on to the aperture. So with the aperture, if there's something I want to focus on specifically, I'm going to lower it way down, because that means that I can just blur out the background or blur out the foreground or blur out anything that I don't want in focus. But then on the flip side, maybe I do want a good majority of the frame, or the depth of field, if we want to get technical, to be in focus. So then I'm going to raise that aperture up. Now, the aperture is going to affect how your image looks before the ISO is. So I want to be able to pick the aperture first. That's why I bring the ISO all the way down. So once you select what you want your aperture to be, then you can go back and adjust the ISO to dial the light in perfectly. So now you've got the image the way you want it to look, and now you have control over the light with just the ISO, as opposed to manipulating all the different settings to try to get the light right. You want to get it down to just one variable. I'll be completely honest, when I first started this, I had no idea what I was doing. I was trying to change all 3 settings all at the same time, and it was so confusing. I shot on auto for a very long time. It was just too much. It was just too complicated. So if you can focus on just dialing in your settings, congratulations, you just got past the most technical part of just setting up your camera. Once you can figure out the settings and dial those in, then comes the fun and creative stuff. Next, I want to talk about composition. Now, it's like a big fancy word, but this is what makes things feel more balanced, more organized. A good composition can be the difference between being drawn into an image or just swiping away. A good composition is going to guide the viewer's eye. It's going to make the shot more meaningful. It's going to enhance the storytelling, and maybe even make like the overall mood of what we're watching a little bit better. Now, when we're talking about composition, of course, you can shoot vertically or you can shoot horizontally. Now, if you're shooting vertically, weighting everything right to the center is the best way to shoot, because it's a narrow screen. It just eliminates awkward cropping or things being too small. But now if we're talking about composition and we're shooting horizontally, there's an entire library of techniques or rules that you could use to kind of guide and lead you and direct you to creating a better composition. The 3 easiest and most powerful composition techniques, and ones that I like to use and many people use in most of their images, are the rule of thirds, leading lines, and using foreground and background layers. So the rule of thirds is basically, if you put a grid on your screen, I want to place that subject in one of the 4 corners. What this is going to do is it's going to kind of weight the image, it's going to leave some negative space, and overall it just creates a much more pleasing image. Now, if we're talking about leading lines, that's finding a line or angles or anything that's going to take that line and just draw your eye directly to the subject. For example, with me talking right now, I'm in my backyard, but you'll notice how I sat directly in front of the corner because I have these 2 lines on my outside that point right into the center of me. So that's like a very basic, simple example of how you could use leading lines. And then foreground and background blur, it's kind of self-explanatory, but I love to use this because I think it's absolutely beautiful. This is where you'd pull your aperture down super low, and if you want to focus in on one particular detail or someone's face and you just want to eliminate all the noise from your frame, it's going to help the viewer's eye go directly where you want it, as opposed to having a bunch of noisy stuff in the background or whatever else is in the frame. It's just going to blur it out so it guides your eye directly to exactly where we want to see it. Moving on to number 3, I want to talk about focusing and using autofocus. So back when I started creating content, I didn't have autofocus on my camera. I would literally set up a broom where I wanted to stand, focus in on the broom, and then I would go and I would stand where the broom was, and I would just stay in that one spot because I knew that as long as I didn't move, I would still be in focus. Now, we have come a long way when it comes to autofocus on cameras, and it's an absolute game changer because it's literally the reason that a single person like myself is able to go out and get shots like you're seeing right now. I would not be able to move the camera or frame my subject the way that I have in these shots because I can't full focus in man and gimbal and like, it's just at some point you just need some help. And with a thing like autofocus, especially the autofocus on the Z6 III, it has been insanely helpful because it's so trustworthy and reliable. Now, I made an entire video on just how awesome the autofocus is on the Nikon Z6 III. I mean, when you get your subject into the frame, if you have the settings right and that thing latches on, like, you are solid gold. You can focus on composition, you can focus on framing, you can focus on literally everything else except making sure that your subject's in focus, and it is the coolest thing ever. So if you want to watch that, I'll just put a link right here and you can go watch that video and learn a little bit more about the autofocus on the Z6 III system, because it is just it's so good. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this video is lens choice. And I know this may seem like an obvious topic, like Ellie, obviously, if you want a wide shot, you're going to use a wide lens, or if you need to zoom in, you're going to use a zoom lens, but it's not really what I want to talk about. So one of the really unique things, and that I didn't learn until later on through a lot of practice, was something called compression. And it's basically taking everything within your frame and compressing it down. I know compression is like the most boring term ever, but it just makes, when you do it right, it just makes the image so beautiful. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Notice how in this shot, you get a bit of foreground, a bit of background with the subject looking very bold in the middle. Now take a look at where I was standing. I could have captured my subject on really any lens that was wide enough to get her in the frame, but I chose the 85mm lens because it brought the entire setting closer in. And I mean, sure, yes, I zoomed in to make her closer, but it brought the entire setting into a more intimate feel as opposed to just getting closer to my subject. Now take a look at this shot right here. Notice how the horizon is pretty far and the ocean seems pretty vast. So this is almost the same shot standing just on the opposite side of the boat, but on a much tighter lens. Everything feels much more intimate. And then you have the same thing here. The subject is much closer, feels much more prominent and just kind of bold in the scene, whereas this, you get a broader look at the entire setting. Also, with the compression, you do get a bit more of the background blur and the foreground blur. So if you don't have one of those lenses that has a fancy like f1.2 or f1.4, if you're working with like a f4 and f5.6, if you back up and then zoom in, the background's going to be more blurred as well as the foreground, or, you know, anything that's not in focus. Now, before I sign off, what I really want to know, and I want you to leave it in the comments below, is did you learn something from this video, or are you already using all these techniques? And if you are using all of these techniques and you've got your settings dialed in, is there anything that you do differently than what I mentioned here? Because like I said, I'm always learning, so I'm curious what you're up to and kind of how you shoot and different techniques that you use. And yeah, I would love to know. So just leave them in the comments below. And I hope you did learn something from this. Let me know if you have any questions or you want me to elaborate on anything, because I'm more than happy to do that. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.